Whenever there's a new Smash fighter, there's always a new character render that goes along with it, typically with a modernized redesign, and that's always a neat treat to see. People enjoy it so much that fan-made Smash renders are a popular subgenre of fan art on its own. In fact, there are many artists and entire YouTube channels that are dedicated to making these faux renders, such as KronoMuzik, formerly branded as the aptly named Smashified. When Smash Ultimate came around, we did get our usual dose of updated character renders, but there was also something else. Something new. The Smash Banner, or mural, the Everyone Is Here poster. We don't really have an official name for it. It's a fantastic piece of artwork where all the fighters are gorgeously painted in an action pose across the battlefield. And that is what we'll be trying to replicate today. Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Render Decoder, a show where we study official video game artworks, break down its art style, then try our best to replicate it in the end. I'm your host, ElevenZM, but you can also call me Thom, because I know, it's a mouthful to say. I think I've waffled on for long enough, so let's just jump right into it. When studying any piece of media, it's always helpful to look at the people responsible for creating them. In this case, the artist behind the Everyone Is Here illustration is Yusuke Nakano. Nakano is no stranger to Nintendo. He has an extensive history with the company, responsible for creating lots of iconic official artwork, dating as far back as 1992, as the package designer for Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3. In an interview with Nintendo Dreamweb, translations provided by Nintendo Everything and Silicon Era, Nakano describes his creative process. Quote, I got the idea from Mr. Sakurai that having a wide design with all the characters included would really stand out as promotion material at events like E3. It was decided I would design something kind of realistic with a feeling of death. First, I designed Mario and Breath of the Wild Link with a thick brushed oil paint aesthetic and showed it to Mr. Sakurai. He liked the design and gave me the go-ahead. While thinking of the overall compositional balance and character poses, I would check on the poses with all the characters' original creators, and also think about how it would look both horizontally and vertically. This was all done in parallel, so it was quite a pain. But the overall sketch was finalized surprisingly smoothly. It felt like something descended upon me. End quote. Before we continue, I'd like to give credit to ElevenZM, who made all of the transparent character isolations from the mural. I've linked their Twitter as well as their DeviantArt in the description, so check it out. With all this in mind, let's take this proverbial hammer and try to break down the art style. As mentioned in the interview, the mural uses an oil painting aesthetic to achieve its look, although I'm fairly certain this piece was done digitally, or at the very least partially, since some of the strokes here don't seem characteristic of thick oil painting. I could be wrong about this, but either way, real oil paints are expensive and my trusty old tablet is the only thing I have with me. I think this is also a good time for a disclaimer. I'm not a professional illustrator. I still have a lot to learn, but you know, it's just all good fun. This is only my interpretation of the art style, so take everything I say with a pinch of salt and feel free to disagree with the methods I use. Criticism is one of the best ways to improve after all, plus comments help with the algorithm. Now, I've tried recreating the banner style before with various different characters to varying degrees of success. However, it wasn't until I zoomed in on a high-res copy that I realized just how much detail the illustrations have. None of the surfaces are actually very smooth. The transition between colors is very noticeable, like flat colors stacked on top of each other. These are all done through various textured brushes, so let's try to identify them. There seems to be at least 3 primary brushes used. A thick, solid brush to create the basic color blocking, a rough stippling brush used for blending, and a dry brush with prominent strokes for the scratchy, painterly textures. Let's try to make a material sphere to replicate this. I use Clip Studio Paint's default gouache brush. It doesn't matter what program you use, but I personally like this one. Now that I have my rough colors intact, it's time to smoothen things up with my stippling brushes. I'll leave links in the description to the brushes I used in the video. Some of them are Clip Studio Paint specific, but I think it should be pretty easy to find similar brushes for your preferred program. Lastly, I'm topping things off with a dry brush. Great! The only thing left is a soft airbrush applied to the highlights to give it that glowing halo effect. Speaking of highlights, let's look at how the characters are lit in the banner. Most of the fighters seem to be backlit, which means the primary light source is coming from behind. This is especially evident with characters like Shulk, Kirby, and Mega Man, making their character silhouettes very visible. This helps make fighters distinct from one another, which is important in a piece where every character is meant to be the focal point. A softer secondary light source is present for some of them as well, a blue glow coming from one side of the banner. This is especially prominent with characters like Yoshi, Ryu, and Piranha Plant. Other characters are additionally lit up by their abilities like Mewtwo's Shadow Ball, Pikachu's Thunder Jolt, and Mario's Fireball. A huge part of what makes the banner great is how much personality is packed in each of the individual illustrations. From Sonic's mid-run motion blurs that harken back to his Sonic CD sprites to something as simple as Diddy Kong eating a banana. Nakano has done a fantastic job in capturing the fidelity of each character with their dynamic and sometimes even interactive poses. Nakano stated that part of the process of creating the character illustrations is considering how they would be placed, as well as checking in with the character's original creators for the poses. Fortunately, my character of choice is Geno, and as a Super Mario RPG character, I think it's a given that I'd have to place him somewhere near Mario. Unfortunately, unlike Nakano, I can't validate the character poses with its original creators because I simply do not have those connections. So I thought of doing the next best thing. Now, I don't have the biggest Twitter following ever, but I ran a poll asking people which of the poses I've come up with they liked best. And while the answers were many and varied, ultimately, there was one that came up the most frequently. So, let's move forward with my pose rationale. When coming up with this pose, I made a rule for myself that it has to be something that hasn't existed before, at least in an official capacity. I didn't want it to look like a fake clique where you paste in an existing render and call it a day. I developed the pose alongside the Mario illustration so it would look right when I eventually stuck him in the banner. Geno is a stoic warrior type and a puppet, so I tried my best to communicate this with a serious, almost stiff looking pose. I contrasted this with his cape spread out to bring in more dynamic shapes, and utilized his move Geno Beam to bring in more action, and to also act as a secondary light source. I started out by creating a rough lighting sketch so I know where I'll blend my colors. It doesn't look very nice at the moment, but that's okay, it's only there for my reference. Once I was happy with it, I started doing the basic color blocking. I've decided to render the hat first, with the use of my stippling brush. I added a few scratches here and there, using my dry brush to complement it. Skipping forward a bit, the biggest challenge for me was trying to get the wooden textures to look right in the art style. I've decided to take a look around the banner and see how Nakano handled illustrating wood textures. Aha! There it is! Zooming in on the ice climbers, you can see that their hammers are made of wood. To create the wooden effect, I used a stripe brush to create the individual wood grains. The closer it got to the edges, the lighter the color I used. I added some bumps and indents to the wood to break up the stroke pattern a bit and make the wood seem much more believable. Lastly, I made a new layer on top of the wood grains and overlaid a stipple texture to give it the same texture artifacts that are found on Popo's hammer. I basically repeated the same process for the rest of Geno's wooden body. I referenced a lot of the metallic objects in the banner. Thankfully, we have an abundance of sword fighters in Smash, for better or for worse. Finally, the only thing left was adding in the Geno Beam effect. I noticed that Dark Samus's charge shot was similar to the effect I was trying to achieve, so I referenced it and mixed it up with Ness's PSI effects. I then added in the secondary lighting effects. And Ta-da! There you have it! An approximation of Geno illustrated in the Smash Mural art style. I know it's not perfect, and there's always room for improvement, but I did try my best, and if you stuck him in the banner, he wouldn't really stick out like a sore thumb, so I'll take that as a win. Before this video ends though, I've got one more thing prepared for you. Please, take a look. Thank you for watching the first ever episode of Render Decoder. I'm so glad that I finally got this video out. I've been working on it for months, studying the style, creating the artwork, writing the script, and editing the video around it. I know this is nothing like my usual content, but hopefully you found this fun or interesting. I am working on another animation project, but honestly, I'm kind of tired of doing the same thing, so don't expect it to be an unsolved thing. Sorry. Big thanks to Loeder, who I asked to make the intro jingle for me. Sorry if I messed up pronouncing that. He makes great chiptune covers of various video game tracks, as well as his own music, so check him out. Thank you to PidgiWiki, which has been an incredible resource for tracking down high-resolution official Nintendo artworks and renders. Seriously, my copy of the Smash banner is 25,000 pixels wide. It's intense. And finally, thank you to my patrons, Madison and Eleanor. I'll try to be more consistent with content. I'm sorry, I just find it really difficult to balance this whole thing since I do have a day job on top of other hobbies I do outside of YouTube. But here's to hoping that might change one day, you know? I have more episodes coming in the future, but for now, what other video games do you want me to tackle? Do you want me to keep making Smash editions? Did I do a good job? I need your validation, please. Let me know in the comments. Until then, I'll see you on the next one. Bye!